Hello guys, and welcome again in this video. So this video is a continuation of the previous video. So we have done the first part of it. So if you have not watched the previous video, make sure you watch part 2 of this video. You'll find the start of this video. So here we are focusing on determining the nature of the roots. So we were doing this question. So we did the question and answered it correctly, and then we were determining the nature of the roots, and then we found that the roots were real and distinct. So now we wanted to find those roots. So remember, I said in your exam question paper, if they say you determine the nature of the roots, you end where you say the roots are real and distinct. So now I wanted us to find those roots and then evaluate to see if indeed those roots are real and distinct. So now we continue and make sure, oh sorry, here there was supposed to be, you see the discriminant is b squared minus 4ac. So here is 4a and a is 2. So we are missing the part of c, and we said c is 0. So that becomes correct. And then here you have a 0. So it becomes 2 squared minus 0 equals to 4. So now we continue and then we find those solutions or those roots and see if they are real and distinct. So we use our quadratic formula. Our quadratic formula x1 is equals to minus b. Our minus b, what is our value of b? Our value of b there is 2. So we have negative 2 plus, right? So I'm just looking at the first solution where I have a positive here, remember? And then now I put, remember this b squared minus 4ac, already you calculated that and you got that to be 4. And then we put that 4 over 2a. Our 2a, our a is 2. Remember that the 2 for a, the value of a is there. And let's look at the first solution. You use your calculator and find your first x. And then if you use our calculator, we get to have minus b, and it is minus 2 plus square root of b squared, so it's 4. We calculated that already. And then over 2a, 2 times a is 2, right? So what's the first solution? The first solution, x1 is equals to 0. Then you calculate x2. Again, you find x2. X2 will be equals to minus 2. When there's plus here, remember there was plus or minus. So the first one you use the plus, so the next one we use a negative. So it's negative. And then that thing under the square root we calculated already, which is 2 squared minus 4a. So we got that to be root of 4 over 2a, 2 times 2. So what is our x2? The second root. Then you use your calculator, and then where there is plus you only change there to put a minus. So we change where there was a positive, then we put a negative, because the quadratic has 2 solutions. The other one, okay, the other one is a positive and the other one has to be minus 1. So if we look, minus 1 and 0, those roots, they are real numbers because they are in our number line. Our number line has negative and positive numbers. So those numbers are real. They are real and different. They are different because you have negative 1 and 0. So those two roots, they are distinct. They are different. So that's it for the first question, to find the roots. So now let's look at another question. We evaluate the nature of the roots or determine the nature of the roots. Let's look at the second question raised here. So the second question we have here, we determine the nature of the roots. Okay, so the first one we did. Okay, now let's use this one. Okay, so now we use this question, 4x squared plus 4x plus 1. So this thing is equal to 0. The equation is saying determine the nature of these roots, right? So whether they are real, they are distinct, or what. So now we look, what is our value of a? Our a is the one that is having x squared. The coefficient there is 4. What is our p? Our p is that one which is next to a number with a single x. So our p is 4 and c is equal to 1. Let's determine the discriminant. Remember, the discriminant is what is under the quadratic formula, the root of the quadratic formula. Our discriminant is b squared minus 4ac, right? So let's evaluate this discriminant. So what is our p? Our p is a 4. Then you square that minus 4 times 4 times 1, because A is 4 and C is 1. So what is the answer? The answer, you use your calculator, and then you use your calculator. Make sure you are friendly with your calculator, because if you're not friendly with your calculator, you'll have a problem. So it's 4 times 4 times 1. So times 1 is the same thing, so I don't have to do that. So I'm saying that our discriminant is equals to 0. And if the discriminant is equals to 0, let's see the case of the nature of those roots. So you see case 2, if the discriminant b squared minus 4ac is equals to 0, then that means you have real and equal roots. So the roots are real and equal. So you have real and equal roots. So now you've answered that question correctly. So, but for the purpose of this video, remember, I said when you are asking an exam, you end here to determine the nature of the roots. But now I want us to see if the roots are real and equal. So we go to our quadratic equation, our quadratic formula. This is a very important formula. It's a tool that is a favorite of many learners. So it's making life easier. We call it a bulldozer because it solves any quadratic equation. Right. So now you come here, then you have x1. What is x1? Minus b. So what is our b? Is a 4 plus, because the first case we put a plus, then it doesn't matter whether in first case you put, if you decide to start with that one with a minus, put a minus, then it becomes the x1. It is no problem. Then what is this one? Remember the b squared minus 4ac, you got that to be a 0, and then over 2a. And what is our a? Our a is a 4. Then let's see, what do we get? So we use our calculator there to make sure we have the proper thing. So plus the root of 0 over 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 8. Then you get the answer here. X1 is negative 1 over 2. Then let's look for x2. X2, you put your negative 4. Then there is a plus. Now the second case you put a negative over root 0. 0 because the discriminant already we calculated it. It doesn't matter whether you substitute here, and that's no problem at all. Then you have 2 times 4. Then what else you have? Then you use your calculator. Our calculator assists us. Well, then where there was a plus, you change that plus to be a negative. Then the answer becomes negative 1 over 2. So you see these answers, they are equal to one another. X1 is negative half and the other one is negative half. So those answers are equal, and they are also real numbers. Negative 1 over 2 is a real number, right? So now let's look at another case first before we run out of time. We have a limited time. Now the next case that I want us to look at is 3x squared. 3x squared plus 3x plus 1. We want to evaluate the nature of the roots. So what is our a? Our a is 3 because it's the number that comes before the x squared. What is our p? Our p is a 3, the number that has a single x, and c is the number that does not have any x. So it's a constant, so it's 1. Then let's evaluate the discriminant. The discriminant formula is saying b squared minus 4ac. Then what is our p? Our p is a 3. Then you put 3 squared minus 4. The a there is a 3. And what is the c? The c is 1. So what is the answer that we have here? Then we use our calculator. Make sure you are friendly with your calculator. I always emphasize this point, because if you say you will use your calculator only when it comes to exam time, you will finish the 3 hours without having written everything in your question paper, because you'll be stuck with the pressing of the calculator. So you say 4 times 3 times 1, if you like, but I hate saying multiply by 1 because it doesn't change. It's an identity, that thing, multiplication identity. So it's anything multiplied by 1, you get that. So you get a negative answer. So, and this thing is what? Is less than 0, right? This thing is less than 0. So what is the case when the discriminant is less than 0? Case 3 is telling us if your discriminant is less than 0, you have non-real and unequal roots. Let's look if we can find the roots, right? So if we are talking about non-real numbers and real numbers, those numbers that are non-real, they are imaginary numbers, the numbers that they do not exist in real life. So let's see if we can have the answer. So let's open up some more space here to write, okay, and see what we have. Then remember, like I just explained, I like explaining things even if you get bored, right? I make sure everything is clear. So now let's see our x1 minus b. What is our b? Our b is negative 3 plus, I'm using the first case as a plus, so it doesn't matter whether you start with the plus or we start with the same thing. Then what is under the square root? Already you calculated that and you got negative 3, which is equal to 2 times 3. Okay, so if you see now we have this part here, this part which is the root of negative 3, which is non-existent, or it makes our thing becomes non-real. You cannot have a square root of a negative answer. That's the knowledge for your grade. But then if you see, then that part, if you press your calculator, sometimes you get the answer as math error undefined, right? Because you cannot have a square root of a negative answer. So that's why if we press our calculator, then it becomes a math error. Let's prove that it is a non-real thing. Non-real. So you press our calculator, minus 3 plus square root of negative 3. So a square root of any negative number is undefined, right? So you see, you get a math error because of that part is undefined. So that's why you end up having this thing as a non-real roots, non-real roots. Otherwise, that's it for today. And then the knowledge, so you know, for your grade, a square root of a negative answer, it's a math error. But then if you use other advanced calculators, right, when you press a square root of negative 3, other advanced calculators, let's say you press a square root of negative 3, you find out you get square root of 3 and something like an I. This I is a complex number. Complex numbers, those numbers are the imaginary numbers, right? The I is for imaginary numbers or complex numbers. So that thing is equal to square root of negative 1. So that information is not for your syllabus, but I'm just sharing with you in case you have those expensive calculators and you press and you see that you get something like root and you have I's. Those numbers are imaginary. They do not exist. In our number system, we only have real numbers, the negative and positive numbers. Then these complex numbers, they are not there in our number line, so they do not exist. That's all for this video, and then I'm leaving you with some task, your homework. Make sure you do it. Now this is your task to do. You determine the nature of these roots. So if maybe you solve the answer, you can share with us in the comment section below, and make sure you try these activities. Determine the nature of the roots. Number one is number one. Let's see. Number one, you have this one, 3x squared plus 4x plus 1. Number 2, you determine the nature of the root of 3x squared plus 5x plus 1 equals to 0. That's your task. Please make sure you attend to it and make sure you stay safe, you stay home, you wash your hands regularly, you make sure you stay away from crowded areas so that you become safe from the coronavirus. From me, it's all I had for you for now.